Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Industrial Packaging Podcast with me, your host, Nathan Dube, Digital Marketing Specialist at Industrial Packaging. On today's episode, we have special guest, Greg Berguig, Vice President of Sales and Marketing at PAC Machinery. Greg, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nathan.
You are most welcome. So before we get started, can you tell me a little bit about your background with PAC Machinery and what it is your role entails?
Yeah, sure. So I am the Vice President of Sales and Marketing at PAC Machinery. So my role, I get involved in sales projects with our team, as well as marketing and getting the word out about all types of cool solutions that we have for flexible packaging, whether that's shrink wrapping of products, shipping of products in mailers, flow wrapping, all different, vacuum packaging, bag sealing, etc.
Awesome. Great. Thank you for that background information. So without further ado, we'll jump into the first question, which is, who is PAC Machinery? I mean, what do you guys do? What is your main focus?
Yeah, so PAC Machinery manufactures, obviously, packaging equipment and packaging materials. We make machines that allow you to put a product in a bag really quickly, seal it, print on it. We make machines that vacuum the air out of products for extended shelf life, flow wrapping of products like, energy bars, cookies, things like that, sealing of bags, anything that goes into flexible type material. We typically have a packaging machine for it, and we also make the associated packaging materials. So to provide a complete system for our customers.
Awesome. Thank you very much. That kind of answers question 2, which is what do you do? So we can move on from there. So next up we have...
And we've been doing it for a long time, sorry. So we've been doing it since essentially the 1950s.
Oh, wow. That's a long time to be in business. Fantastic. Yeah, well, I wish you all the best going into 2021 and beyond. So that being said, we'll move on to the next question, which is, what will be the major trends for packaging and e-commerce in 2021?
Well, there's certainly a lot of them. I'll just take a step back, and we know that e-commerce and online ordering and direct-to-consumer shipments have been growing, tremendously pre-pandemic, and if you talk to anybody or read what's happening, I mean, the pandemic and COVID really accelerated that, right? Forcing us, keep people at home who wouldn't normally order things who go to a store, right? That wasn't really an option. So things are being ordered, and the growth has been tremendous. We kind of, as an industry, and that industry in particular, right, had to catch up really quick and put systems in place, equipment, processes, things along those lines to catch up with that. What you kind of now see is manufacturers or packagers kind of speeding up with that growth. And apologies, somebody's...
That's okay, no worries.
You see people speeding up with that growth. So the trends that we really see are, we hear from customers, right? I can't hire enough labor to show up and do, pack out what I need to get shipped, whether that is prepping products in clear bags with a label and a suffocation warning for shipping to a fulfillment center, right? Or getting those products out the door to ship in a poly mailer directly to a customer. So we see a couple trends happening. One, automation, right? If I have one person doing 1 pack a minute, now I can have one person, let's say, 5 or 6 times as productive. The next thing we see is the right sizing of materials, right? So going from a one-size-fits-all package to really fit for whatever the product is being shipped. We've all had that experience where you get a package at your doorstep, whether that's a box or a bag, and it's like 10 times too large for the product that's inside. So right-sizing that. And then the third thing that we see is materials being used, right? So now we've got all this packaging that's showing up at the consumer. How do we come up with more environmentally conscious materials?
Absolutely, yeah. These are trends that we are seeing here in industrial packaging as well. I mean, the supply chain really got hammered this year, and despite that, I mean, obviously for consumers that was probably a big issue, but it's been a welcome challenge. We'll call it a silver lining to 2020. Here at Industrial Packaging, we had to play catch up a bit because demand increased practically overnight.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we're seeing a lot of the same things here too. Now, on the topic of e-commerce, to take that a little bit further, we've come to realize that some manufacturers will not sell direct to consumer. Do you guys do that, and do you have an e-commerce store where people can come to purchase your products on your website?
No. I mean, we deal with customers who typically can do that. Our focus is really to go through the distribution channel, people like Industrial Packaging, right? You guys are local. You can provide the service and support to customers. For many companies, as you know, this is their first piece of automation, or this is their first piece of industrial equipment, right? And being local and able to hold their hand and make sure that they have the right consumables, that they have the air and electrical, that they have the training, things like that. That's really where the distribution channel is so critical, and also, being there to help people uncover ways that they can improve their process.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you for that information. So moving on from there, the next question is, what new developments can we expect to see in Outbound Mailing?
So I think it touches on the trends that I mentioned, right? So automation is number one. And there's systems that have been out there that for a long time, but what we see is, and personally I've witnessed is robotics, where where a robot that hasn't had any additional programming can take a bin of items, can pull the item out, can scan it, and can place it into an outbound shipper, whether that's a box or some type of bag. So it's pretty amazing what has happened there, right? I mean, I don't know if you've seen these, the work of a packer, there's, while fine, there's a big push to reallocate labor for higher level tasks, and robots have been, able to do this job, and people are starting to implement them, especially as volumes increase, right? So you can imagine you have a person that was traditionally a packer that goes essentially, they call them a bot tender, right? They're bringing bins of goods to robotic packing stations that will take the items and pack them out into shipper. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I mentioned right sizing of the packaging, and that's something we've been focused on, where, with outbound shipping, and, a lot of times your batch quantity is one, right? You're putting in one item that's one particular size. In our case, we deal with bags, right? But it could be in a box into a bag, right? And that item could be going from a pair of underwear to a pair of pants to a shirt to some type of tchotchke, that somebody's purchased, a little table fan or something that ships well into a bag, right? And the idea is that the package will adjust in width and length to be right-sized. There's a few benefits for that. One, from a branding perspective, you imagine that in many cases, these brands, their only physical touch point with the customer is receiving of the goods at their doorstep, right? So nobody wants to be perceived as wasteful in today's, environmentally conscious world. That's one. Two, imagine the space that an oversized package takes up in the transportation system, right? I mean, we know that logistics, they came to the point of being broken during COVID. Yes. Yeah. But, now imagine all of a sudden, like, everybody's optimizing their packaging so I can fit more products, more packages per, let's call it truck, right? Whatever carrier you're using, or airplane or whatnot, right? Because everything is more efficient in terms of the packaging. Yeah. So that's two. And then point three on there, right? It's less expensive. I'm using less material, so my costs are going to go down, right? So everybody wins. The supply chain wins, the packer wins, the consumer wins. So that's the second trend. And then I think the third trend, and we talk about the environment a lot, is really seeing new packaging materials coming out. We see a lot of customers who start packaging in a box, right? And then they find that to be expensive and labor intensive and difficult to automate. And they move to a bag and they find that, hey, our product in a bag holds up extremely well. But, I think most of these are polyethylene bags, and polyethylene is fine. And it's, technically it's recyclable. I mean, it's,
right.
There's a shortage of consumer recycled polyethylene. The problem is our recycling supply chain, and where do I go to recycle this material, right? I mean, How Do Recycle has done a good job of teaching customers on this, and store drop-off. Well, if I'm not going to stores as much, I'm probably not going to go and drop it off at the store, and my local recycling center doesn't accept it because it, gums up their equipment and they're not equipped for it. So what do I do? So this third trend on environmentally conscious materials, we've seen things. We recently launched our Restylene blend of poly mailers. It has over 50% recycled content, and that's a mix of consumer recycled, plastics. Think about like your high density milk jugs and things like that, as well as industrially recycled resin. We're able to push that to higher content levels. We have biodegradable, compostable materials for shipping that will be, we've tinkered around with, and we've got some testing going on with that and some pilot customers. And then I think the big one and the big rush will be in, curbside recyclable materials. Think about paper, right? Because that's the easiest thing to curbside recyclable. Your paper bags, corrugated boxes, things like that. Right. We're going to see that in the coming. I would be willing to bet we see that the next, holiday season. You'll be seeing more curbside recyclable bags. I mean, this trend has started. There are some companies using that now in a manual packing format, but we'll see automation of that.
For sure. I mean, all of the topics you just listed out are things that we've been watching, and I've produced some content on it this year. Automation is certainly a big one. I wrote a couple articles about collaborative robots and how automation itself is, in a way, I mean, in the middle of the pandemic, when you think about it, automating is another way just to make your distribution center safer, because you're going to have less people working near each other, the less possibility of transmission of, the virus, or, just regular flu and cold symptoms for that matter. So it's kind of a weapon against COVID, so to speak, in some cases. We've seen a lot of rise in interest from consumers on the environmental side of things. And as you mentioned, things can get a little complicated with single stream recycling, particularly when we're talking about polyethylene and some of the other plastic formulations of flexible packaging, because while, they are technically recyclable, most municipal compounds, don't have the infrastructure to recycle it. A lot of people don't really want to take the extra step to kind of get into more complicated things. And those who do, we have spoken to some people who've been like, well, I'm willing to pay a third party to do it, but then when cost comes into it, sometimes they change their tune. So, that's another trend that we saw as well. So all great stuff, and I really appreciate your feedback. That was an excellent answer.
Yeah, and I think actually, just to touch on what you mentioned about automation, it certainly makes things safer, right? Having less people near each other. It's also a better use of your resources, right? How many people have a building that they pay rent on and they pay utilities and everything else that are only running at one shift or maybe two shifts, because, primarily because, having trouble finding people to work that third shift, right? So now if I have a system of robots where I can do it more efficiently, instead of needing 20 people to do my packing, maybe I can do it with 3 or 4. So certainly some advantages there.
It's interesting talking about having a warehouse that's, completely or mostly automated. I read an article, I can't remember exactly the details off the top of my head, but there was a guy who was brought into a company, and, they said, I guess he was an economist, or he was specialized in saving large corporations money. And they said, can you identify some things in our company to help us save money, which was, basically what he does, professional consultations for Fortune 100 companies or whatever. So as it turned out, whoever this company was, they had a lot of warehouses that were completely automated. And he said, is this 3 shifts? And they said, yep, all day, all night. He said, well, shut the lights off. And they said, well, what do you mean? So they had the overhead lights that you would normally have, for a human workforce. And so that's literally all they did, is they just shut the lights off in the building, except for when the inspectors came in to make sure that the machinery was running as it should. And they they saved in excess of, I think, $6 million just from this little change. And that doesn't even include all the other things that he consulted them on. So when you look at, this new world we're going into with robotics, with automation, I think we're going to see a lot of unexpected opportunities for cost savings.
Yeah, definitely. It'll be exciting to see what else comes up and changes, right? Yeah,
for sure. All right, great. So moving on from there, the next question is, what are some of the things that can impact pricing for fulfillment centers, particularly in regards to packaging?
Yeah, so there's a few things. Great question, by the way. Obviously, where we focus is on your variable costs, right? So labor is one that I can think about, right? If I have one person who's able to pack out, 100 to 150 orders an hour, right? But now all of a sudden they're able to do 3, 4, even 500 orders an hour with automation, right? That's going to be my per unit pack out cost has now dropped dramatically.
Absolutely.
So, and it's not just for that, it's, balancing that labor, right? You think about, right now we're off peak, but you think about the peak holiday season, right? How much temp labor needs to be brought in and trained and all this extra overhead and liability that comes in, right?
Right.
Those are what I consider hidden costs there. So, that is extremely important. The other thing is your packaging material. There can be a lot of savings there, right? So if you're using boxes now and you go to bags, that's tremendous savings. If I go to bags with automation, that's even bigger savings, right? And then if I go to bags with automation where I'm, creating the material on demand in function of the size of the product, that's even further savings. And as we talked about, that doesn't just reflect the material cost savings. All of a sudden now I have freight savings as well, right? You think about dim weight pricing and what's going on there. People switch from boxes to bags because they're smaller, right? But now people are getting dinged for dim weight on bags, because carriers need to their business and they need to make money as well. So you have that benefit, and then additionally, you have further benefits just from, I don't need to inventory as many SKUs, right? If I'm using, a 10 by 13 and a 14.5 by 19, 19 by 24 poly mailer, if I have one size of film that accommodates for all of those, right, it's less SKUs to inventory, and it's higher volumes of a particular SKU. So, as the volumes go up, price goes down. So I think you see all those things. And, you mentioned the lights, right? That's a great example of additional benefits that can result. And I think, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. So I like, the discussion around boxes and bags. It's interesting because going back to the environmental side of things, a lot of people have this idea in their heads that, they want to use cardboard or pre-pandemic they did, and some still do now. But something that's coming to light is that, well, yes, cardboard is recyclable, and, the poly bags are either not, or you can recycle them and they're complicated, but you use a lot less material when you're using bagging versus the cardboard. And one thing that a lot of people forget about when it comes to single stream recycling is that due to contamination, a lot of the stuff that gets thrown into a single stream recycling bin, specifically paperboard, cardboard, and paper, is if there's any drops of liquid or food particulates that gets onto that material, it ends up in a landfill anyway. So when you think about the environment,
No, I mean, I was sorry to interrupt. I went to a recycling center earlier in 2020, right before the pandemic started, just to see with my own eyes what was going on at the local recycling center. It is far different, than what consumers expect when they just put something in the recycling bin.
Right.
It's, at the recycling center, they call it wish cycling, right? Where, consumers are putting things in that they imagine are recyclable. And in fact, if you take a look, there's very few items that get recycled that actually have a tangible environmental benefit, right?
Yep.
Aluminum cans, fantastic. That's got a high, you can make money off of that. Glass, if you have a local glass place that can melt it down, great. If you have to transport it, no. I saw pallets and pallets of corrugated that basically gets shipped off to another country, right? It was a container gets loaded. It was getting loaded right in the container, gets shipped off somewhere else, and who knows what happens to it. So based on what you were saying, using less material is better for the environment, period. I don't care what material it is, right? If you can use, half the amount of material or even less than that, it's fantastic. And, you're concerned about the poly and the recycling. I mean, I'm literally staring at compostable plant-based poly mailers right here in my office. So
nice.
It's there. The question is, are people going to pay a little extra for it?
Yeah, that's been a big question. I've written quite a few articles this year and last about bio-based polybags, string film, and the like. And it's, it's an interesting topic because I think we're getting to a point where consumers, rather than just calling for environmental friendliness, some of them, and maybe even more than some, are willing to pay the extra for it. But the flip side of that coin is, when I was doing research about the companies that currently offer, quality bio-based films, there's really not a lot out there. I mean, I think I was able to identify between half a dozen to a dozen companies. Now, is bio-based films or bags something you guys are involved with?
Very much so. Like I said, I have some that we, some bag on a roll, automatic bagging materials right here in front of me that we have pilots on now, and it's basically something that can be taken and put right in the industrial compost bin.
Yeah, that's awesome. I just wrote an article about this the other day. That's fantastic. And I'll tell you what, here at Industrial Packaging, our sales reps, we've been having discussions about this on and off. So I'll definitely be, forwarding this information to my sales manager. Maybe they'll reach out to talk to you about it, because we are seeing a growing interest in bio-based films and materials. So I will make a note of that.
I mean, I appreciate that. I mean, the key is cost there, right? Who's going to pay? This is going to cost. It's going to cost more, no question. So who's going to pay for this cost? Is it the brand? Is it the consumer? Can it be passed off in some sense? Unfortunately, what happens is, without marketing behind the product, it's perceived as an added cost, and those things can add up. These things are there, and I think that's going to be another portion. Yes, and I think pushing it off, or making the consumer pay a little bit more for that is probably the avenue that's going to happen, unless government steps in and starts imposing some packaging surcharges, which I wouldn't be surprised if something like that happens, right? We have it for glass, and we have it for other things where the government has some involvement.
Right.
And to see what's going to happen there, I would actually look to Europe, because their recycling processes and stuff are, I would say, far ahead of the things that we do here in the U.S.
Yeah, I've noticed that as well. So thinking about the environmental aspect of this, and going back to something you said that I found interesting, is that you actually took the initiative to go to your local recycling center and see this for yourself firsthand. And, that's a thought that I'm sure on the environmental movement side of things, I'm sure people have done that. But I think for the most part, the majority of people in America probably haven't taken that initiative. And I think if more people were exposed to seeing that in action and to seeing the truth of the matter, they may be more inclined to spend the extra money because they'd actually be seeing the impact that their decisions are making from an environmental standpoint. So, that's something I'm kind of hoping to see from whether it's the Discovery Channel or other media outlets who are, producing information about our planet Earth. It would be great to see more interactive content, whether it's video or documentaries or whatever, that shows that impact.
It would.
Yeah.
Yeah, it certainly would. I think it's certainly a bit controversial, right? You have this perception of recycling, and then you go see it for yourself, and you're like, oh, I see. Right?
Yeah.
It kind of reveals, and if I'm a recycling center, like, why do I want to, open that up? But what you can find actually a lot of interesting stuff when we talk about automation is recycling centers that are implementing automation to make their systems more efficient. And I think there, instead of having, it's essentially labor, right? It's essentially people on the line. They got to sort out. They got to, inspect. They got to do this and that. You have robots with vision systems, and there's some pretty cool things. A quick Google search will expose a lot in terms of recycling centers and automation. And, I think there's some really cool stuff going on.
For sure. Great. Well, that was an excellent topic to cover, and I appreciate your feedback. So from there, we will move on to the next question, which is, what trends can we expect to see in the polybagging market?
Well, I think as it relates to e-commerce logistics, and I think I kind of covered some of those, right? If it's outbound shipping, the materials and the right sizing of the bag, the automation. You also see another one we didn't talk about is down gauging of materials, right?
Yep.
So a lot of times people are just using a material thickness just because, right? They went to that big catalog book that they get or online, and that's just what somebody chose, right? And a lot of times we see people using like a 3 mil bag where, you should at least go to 2.5 mil, but even a 2 mil will work, right? So using thinner materials, right now there's kind of a industry standard spec of 2 mil thickness for poly mailers. In reality, you can go thinner. It's just a matter of can the conveyor systems and everything else handle that thinner material. One thing that we have done at PAC Machinery, we introduced last year, we have automatic bagging systems that print directly on the bag. We also introduced automatic bagging systems that print and apply a shipping label onto the bag. One of the reasons that we did that, and it might seem counterintuitive, right? Somebody says, well, why do I want a label? I just want to print directly on the bag. Well, direct thermal labels oftentimes are less expensive than the higher quality ribbon required to print on the bag. And direct thermal labels, I don't need printer ribbon. But more importantly, with the stiffness of a label, I can go to a thinner bag material, and I'm not worried about scannability of the package through the supply chain, right? So a label maintains that stiffness. I can go to a 2 mil bag, and I don't have any scanning issues, or my carrier doesn't have scanning issues. I can even go thinner. So I see that happening. The other thing that we see, especially a lot with the label, is, we talked about outbound shipping, but what about all the stuff that's got to get prepped for, a fulfillment center, right? You think about if I'm an apparel company, right? I obviously don't make my apparel in the U.S. for the most part. I mean, some companies do, right? So I get pallets of clothing. I get it from overseas. They're folded. I got to put it into a poly. We've all gotten those clear poly bags with the suffocation warning, right? Yeah. And some type of product SKU on it.
Yep.
So we've been pretty involved in automating of that. Putting a label on it actually can help to reduce your overall material costs, flexibility there. So we see trends happening in automation of that. We see trends happening in spill containment as well, right? Again, we've received these same clear poly bags with suffocation warning with, a bottle of window cleaner or, bleach or whatever it is, right? You get it in the mail and you want to make sure it doesn't, if it breaks, it doesn't spill. So a lot
Right.
of automation for spill containment. And for many people, I'll reiterate, their packaging distributor, somebody like Industrial Packaging, is going to be there to work with us, the manufacturer, and them, the packager, to find
Right.
the optimal solution for that.
Yeah, one of the things that you said there that I'd like to focus in on, because it's a topic that I want to try to drive home to our listeners, which I've tried to do through our blogs, and I've written about it on a few different occasions, and that is down gauging your films or your bags or whatnot. One of the things we do when we go into a new client is do an analysis of their packaging line, their machinery, their labor force,
Yep.
and their materials. And one of the things that I think a lot of people just don't think about enough as they should is what gauge are you currently running and how much money can you save by simply going to a lower gauge.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So,
I mean, it's so important, but it also takes you think about organizational change and change management and things like that. Changing something like that in a company, depending on the size, right, takes
Mm-hmm.
buy-in from different departments and different groups of people, and I think that is critical. I mean, nobody wants to be the person that authorizes thinner material and then you've got extra headaches in shipping or whatever else. So I think doing it strategically, somebody comes and tells us, hey, I'm putting stuff in a poly bag and it's 6 mil thick. I'm like, okay, well, and we can't go thinner. I'm like, sorry, if you're using a 6 mil poly bag, unless your thing is like 20 pounds heavy,
Right.
we can design some resin formulation that will be half the thickness and will be, if not equally stronger. So, there's a lot that can be done there.
Yeah, it's looking at the bottom line, and eventually you're going to cross a number on a quote, and they're going to say, oh, I can save that much money? Well, maybe this is worth the headaches after all.
Mm-hmm. Totally. And the environment, right? Let's not forget about that. Half the thickness, half the amount going into the waste stream.
Yep. So aside from down gauging, are there any other ways that companies can cut costs and optimize their production in 2021?
The easiest is automation.
Yeah.
I mean, something we didn't touch upon, and you're talking about cutting costs. Well, with automation, you have to actually spend money to cut costs, right? So
Yep.
It's an investment. Something that we've seen, and it's kind of like going the idea of going to thinner material, and people don't think about it, is financing of your equipment, right? And people say, oh, well, we don't finance, we buy outright. I'm like, this is not like an automobile lease where you give it up after 36 months, right? I mean, interest rates are extremely low. Do a 24, 36, whatever it is, 48 months finance of your equipment. You get a $1 buyout option. Do that math. See the labor savings. If the thing is going to cost you, $1,000, let's call it, I don't know, $1,000 a month over 36 months, right? That's, and then you're going to own it. If you're saving, I don't know, $2,000 a month in labor and total ROI on the system, and our team can certainly help with that. If you're saving $2,000 a month to spending $1,000 a month, all of a sudden, you're essentially with that solution, you're saving $1,000 a month. Right off the bat with financing.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's another thing that we've been trying to drive home to our clients and our new customers is, comparing the lowest cost, quote unquote, to the total cost of ownership. And when you get into that discussion and you see what, leasing equipment is and how the process works, oftentimes people are unaware of, the total cost of ownership and the savings that you can get. Because, it's new to a lot of people. Some people have never done it, and sometimes you can't see, the tree from the forest in that respect. So I'm glad you brought that up. That was a very important topic, and I didn't even expect to speak about it today, so thank you for that.
Well, then there you go. See, that's what happens on a lovely discussion like this.
Absolutely, and it's been a great discussion, but we are coming to the end of the episode, and there's only one question left, which is, where can people find PAC Machinery online? Well, the easiest, obviously, is our website, pacmachinery.com. That's PACmachinery.com. We have a whole host of equipment. We've got overview videos. But, really what we want, don't go, go online, send us a message, and get one of our
packaging pros involved or sales engineers that will really work with them and their packaging distributor, if they have one, something like Industrial Packaging, and understand the scope of the project and what they're trying to accomplish. Our best customers are, hey, I have this problem, help me, right? As opposed to, hey, I've been doing research, what's the price of this machine? Well, how do I know that machine is even good for them? Or, hey, I'm looking at this, competitive brand X of machine, what's the price of your closest one? Well, how do I know that competitive brand X even quoted you on the right equipment? I mean, PAC Machinery, we probably manufacture one of the broadest range or types of, range of flexible packaging machines because there's so many different ways to package a product, right? It's not uncommon that somebody comes to us and, hey, I need a flow wrapper. Oh, well, let's talk. Oh, actually, you know what? You need a side sealer. Or you need an automatic bagger. Or, if you did X, Y, and Z, here's what can happen. So go to our website, do some basic research. That'll take you, where it takes you, and then let us, help them take them to the next level.
Awesome. Well, this was great. This was a really good interview, and what I liked about it is that we kind of took some twists and turns from the questions that we had planned, and we covered some topics that I didn't expect to, and I think this is going to be really valuable to our listeners, so I want to thank you for your time today and coming on the show.
My pleasure, Nathan, and it was great chatting with you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that does it for another episode of the Industrial Packaging Podcast with me, your host, Nathan Dube, Digital Marketing Specialist at Industrial Packaging. I hope you enjoyed today's episode as much as I did, and I hope you tune in next time. But until then, have a great day.